Welcome, everybody. I'm just going to talk a little bit today about a few things. Some 5 steps that I think are important at this time for us to think about with what's been going on. And then at the end, like Anthony says, I have an opportunity for you to ask some questions. These are unprecedented times that we're living in. There's really no script for what we're facing right now. There's no plans that we've been able to put together. There's no real guidance that we can kind of lean on in what I would call this modern technology-enabled era, right? So there's a lot about this current situation that we don't know, but what I do know is that the technology community in which we operate in, which we are part in, is special. It's incredibly resourceful. It's very purposeful. And it's somewhat unrivaled. We always think independently, and we work very creatively for the betterment of our organizations using the technology that we try and deploy. So, I want to keep that in mind as we work through the next few minutes together. I feel that we can probably use these skills, in this current situation and navigate these uncertain waters for all of our companies, our customers, our partners, and our employees. Bear with me. We'll go through this, and hopefully you'll get something interesting out of it. Okay, so a little bit about me. For those that don't know me, and probably most of you don't, let me quickly introduce myself. My name, again, is James Robertson, and I'm part of the CTO organization at Aruba. Prior to joining Aruba, around 18 months ago, I spent most of my career up to that point, almost 21 years in fact, heavily involved in the technology side of the media and entertainment industry. I held roles across the plethora of technology spectrum from, being a security engineer to a network operations guy to a network engineer to a head of infrastructure, vice president. I ran multiple different aspects of our broadcast technology stack during that time, and ended up as the CTO for our shared services organization across the media vertical. I've been involved in all kinds of roles over that part of my career, but, I always had a simple operational mindset that I worked with, solving business problems as pragmatically as possible through the creative use of technology. That was really key and helped me stay grounded during my entire career to this point. So my team had a nickname for me, and it's not a particularly flattering nickname. They called me Hurricane James, as usually where I was, there was something major happening, and that's partly because my team got involved with some of the world's largest events over the last 20 years, everything from royal weddings to multiple general elections and political events, terrorism, wars, floods, earthquakes, and many other man-made and natural disasters. And through that, I try to adapt technology to make a difference in each one of those situations, right? And how technology can be malleable to some extent. Maybe not exactly how you expected to use it going in, but to get an outcome that's appropriate for the situation that you're facing, right? So while we are in this situation today, I feel that some of what I picked up during that time is really applicable to what we're walking through today, especially when it comes to business continuity. So I bet most of you out there really have not seen anything like this before. No one really plans for a pandemic event and an economic shock to the system at the same time, right? It's massively disrupted, what we're used to. And I'm sure that a majority of your, business continuity plans, regardless of what industry you're in, whether it be healthcare, retail, whether it be an enterprise, or, whether it, be education. It doesn't matter what business you're in. Your planning probably didn't take into account this level of disruption to your business. More than likely, your plans really focused on things like, I've lost a building, or I've lost a data center. Maybe, a location is offline. Maybe even a city has receive some kind of impact that is causing you to reevaluate how you do your business. And a lot of those times, we looked at technology in those plans really as a bridge between the event happening and some restoration of services somewhere else potentially. And that could have included, you know, things like work from home, like we're experiencing, but also moving to a secondary site, or moving a large majority of your team from one physical location to another location in order to continue operations. But you know, today we find ourselves in a strange situation where, you know, pretty much we've got 100% of our employee population no longer operating in the facilities that they're used to operating in, right? And it's not because we've done something wrong, right? In fact, you think about our facilities, the facilities are operating as intended. Our buildings are still there and operating and functioning, right? Our data centers are still online. There's nothing changed in the underpinnings of technology. We just can't get to them. We can't access them. We can't use them efficiently. So this is a very strange norm for us because, again, most planning would have taken into account something going offline. And nothing's really gone offline. We're just working in a different way right now. Okay, so I feel that there's really some key areas that we need to dig into that I've been pondering on over the last little while. The end game, really, for any of these is that we have to reduce what I call the friction on the end user. Right, the user right now is incredibly stressed. They're working in a very different way to what they've been used to working in. They may be inhibited in some way because of that, right? They've obviously got other issues surrounding them regarding just life in general at this point. So whatever we do as technologists to try and help them, we have to do it in a way that is going to try and reduce that friction on them, right? That to me is paramount. And to me, I think it really comes down to 4 other components of these 5 areas, right? You have to look at security. We have to address how we're going to make connectivity work. If we're going to do something with technology, we have to understand how we're going to deploy this technology and make it available to the individuals. And then finally, from an IT operating centric point of view, whatever we do, we have to be able to manage it, right? And if we can't manage it in a simple way, then we're in trouble, right? So the idea of reducing this friction, right, we must address everything with the idea that the user is paramount to all of these conversations, right? So let's take a moment and think about security and compliance, okay? So, you know, most of us have very robust security postures. With, you know, documentation, audits, and the likes that really keep our systems and services secure and operating. To me, right now, we're operating in a very different vein. And so, to some extent, some of the things that we have maybe included in those policies, processes, and procedures need to be reviewed with an open mindset, right? We need our IT infrastructure teams and really our security and compliance teams to come together at this point and think pragmatically about how we can maybe loosen some of the burden. I'm not asking that security posture be thrown out the window, but what I am asking or saying is maybe there's a different operating mindset that we have to adjust into right now while we're working through these particular situations in our businesses. So bear that in mind and have those conversations with your teams if you're not already having them, because there's a number of things there that probably you should review at this point, right? So if we can get to that kind of mindset of changes, there's some simple things that we may want to look at. For example, a lot of you may have workstations in your office environments that are now sitting empty, right? The workstations are there. They may even still be powered on, but there's no users sitting at the desks, you know, hitting the keyboard. And not everybody has a laptop, right? Not every employee has a laptop. Some people have to go to their workstations. So the question there is, with an adjustment in security posture and policy, can I change the posture on those workstations and maybe make the workstation available over the internet? So can I look at how to turn on, for example, remote desktop capabilities on those workstations so that users can log in with their credentials and access the image of their desktop remotely and maybe be able to get some things done? Many of you probably have well-established VDI farms that, where you keep these desktop images anyway, and you may have a normal routine that a majority of your users or a portion of your users use virtual desktops regardless. So for you, that may have already solved itself. You may be able to very easily open up an ability for those desktops to be seen remotely. Another option that I think we should really bear in mind are looking at our application stack. So a lot of us over the last few years have pivoted from on-prem applications to cloud-based services, software as a service, platforms as a service, and the likes. And so maybe things like our productivity toolset, our ERP or HR systems, or even some financial systems may actually be cloud-hosted at this point, and so potentially accessible. Now, previously from security posture, you may have locked those down so that even though they were cloud services, they were only accessible through maybe the NAT IP address that you use out of your corporate headquarters, right? So that all traffic had to be funneled through a security boundary out to those services. Maybe you can work with the security teams to look at that and adjust some of those postures so that instead of having to route all that traffic through the company, you can go around it, right? Get the user connected straight to it. Obviously, a lot of companies utilize VPN services, and that's one very important way to get inside of an organization. But some of those VPN services are probably feeling the strain, right? A lot of organizations don't grow their VPN capabilities to support 100% teleworking like we're seeing right now. So even though you may have an advantage if you're a multinational over multiple time zones of time of day and people working in different ways, you may be seeing some high watermarks or some bottlenecking or some sheer capacity problems on those services that need to be somehow relieved, right? And you're looking for a way to potentially do that. So let's think a little bit about connectivity. You may still be struggling with what I just talked about in terms of maybe loosening your security posture slightly in order to handle some of this kind of new way of working for a little while. But, maybe if you can't overcome that, maybe we can look at other ways of doing this connectivity conundrum that we face. So ask yourselves this question: how do we extend the presence of your office securely to now what is a remote worker, right? And then maybe in that, as a secondary question, how do we relieve some of the pressure that we currently face on the infrastructure that we have? And that's really kind of where I want to focus. So at Aruba, we've been handling situations like this in our products for a long time, right? In some cases, many of the techniques that I'm going to talk about in the next few minutes, you may not have explored because it's not kind of how you would normally expect technology to behave. But it's the services and capabilities that we have built into the portfolio. So the first thing I want to remind everyone of is this very key tenet. Aruba's entire product portfolio is built from the ground up with security in mind. Right? That has not wavered. That never has wavered through the entire life of Aruba. And this has been validated over and over again with many deployments in what I would call key industries and even agencies where security is absolutely paramount. So having a strong security underpinning in the products and then being able to present it through clever policy allows a large amount of flexibility on how to pivot some of this technology, and maybe even provide some valuable remote services for your users. So how can you use these capabilities in our current situation? Well, firstly, let's try and address VPN, right? Like I said earlier, maybe some of you are struggling just flat out with capacity on your VPN services that you have today for your population. Many of you may have Aruba controllers in your infrastructure, and you probably don't realize or have slightly forgotten that they can act as a VPN concentrator. So Aruba has a client module, a client software called VIA, Virtual Internet Access, which can be used to create a VPN client connectivity across the internet to a concentrator, where that concentrator has been, I would say, slightly exposed to the internet. I know you're going to kind of call me out here and go, what are you talking about? You want me to expose my concentrator? You must be mad. But you've got to remember, again, that Aruba concentrators, again, with that security mindset in place, by their nature are full layer 7 firewalls. So by adjusting policy, you can limit that exposure to only allow VPN-like connectivity to those controllers. You may already have controllers in your infrastructure that might be sitting a little idle right now because they're dealing predominantly with office connectivity for in-building needs. Maybe they can be examined, and maybe you can look at trying to pivot into this idea at this time. So deploying VIA using existing hardware may be a way to add secured access in a VPN-like fashion and increase capacity, capacity you didn't even know that you had. And in some cases, if you have multiple controllers at different geographies, different locations around the world, and you're in an ability to maybe change the configurations on those controllers to take advantage of VIA, you could actually do some offloading. So where today you might have all of your users funneling towards a VPN concentrator in your data center and you're seeing your internet or that concentrator become a little bit overwhelmed, maybe by offloading to the regions and then using your internal network to push that traffic back across the regions to your hub locations might actually relieve some of that pain point. It's just one option that is possible. So I'd like to point this out, that during this unprecedented time, Aruba has made available a special offer of VIA client licenses for up to 90 days without any obligation. If this can be of help to you, I ask that you reach out to your Aruba account team who has all the details about this. Okay, so moving up the stack a little bit. Let's talk about access points for a second. Many of you probably don't know that all of our access points can be configured, and I mean all of our access points can be configured to not only operate as an access point in your traditional Wi-Fi deployment on the ceiling grid of your building, but also as a remote AP, or something that we call a RAP. As the name suggests, right, a RAP really is a device that is remote, right? It is physically in a different location to what I would call the control elements of the network to which it's reporting. So the AP acting as a RAP creates an encrypted tunnel between itself and its central control point, your controller infrastructure, or gateways, in your data center or potentially in your offices. Again, as long as that controller can be made visible to the internet, then a relationship between a RAP and a business hub can potentially be formed quickly through this simple configuration. So the other advantage is that maybe you need Ethernet. Maybe you've got devices that you need to plug in at someone's home office. So the RAP, many of them configured in this mode, also have Ethernet out ports. So devices can be plugged into those ports. Maybe it's a workstation, maybe it's an IP telephone that you've allowed the user to bring home so they can make phone calls. Whatever it is, potentially that can also be plugged in to that RAP. And the advantage? Well, the user is not messing around changing configurations on their workstation, right? They've taken their laptop home, they've created this RAP environment. That RAP, because it's talking to your infrastructure, is responding in a way that they would expect. It looks like, potentially, the same Wi-Fi network as they have in the office. So instead of having to manipulate configurations on the workstation in order to get that workstation talking to the world or that laptop, all they've done is set up the wrap. The wrap is advertising their Wi-Fi SSID that they're used to from their corporate office. Their laptop, because it's already provisioned, maybe it's got the right certificates, it's already secured to get on that network, just jumps on that Wi-Fi network, right? Keeping that friction incredibly low for that user and giving a little bit more control to the environment. Now you've got a posture where IT actually has a presence in someone's remote location, in their house or wherever it might be, that they can administer, right? And they can look at the policy and they can understand what's going on from a performance characteristics. This could be incredibly helpful, you know, as people continue to work in this mode. And so, you know, think about how that potentially can help your environment, how you can remove some of that friction from a user by handling security through the posturing of wraps at these locations. So, okay, this sounds too good to be true. I hear you, right? So how do I actually go about getting this stuff deployed, right? This can't be, you know, straightforward, right? You're talking about shoving equipment at somebody's house. I can't get to their house. How do I do it? So amazingly enough, the wraps that the software behind it, the technology behind it is incredibly simple to administer. So the IT team will basically provision in our Activate service, which is a cloud-based service. The access point is drop shipped to the user with very simple instructions that you could create to tell them how to plug it into their internet gateway, plug in whatever devices you've given them, and so on. Once that device is plugged in, it calls back to the Aruba Activate capability, gets its base config. It knows then its persona. It knows who it is. It knows what it should be talking to. And once that's done, it creates its tunnel back to the HQ that it's defined to talk to, right? Job done. And the IT staff get to see that device across the network. They get to administer that device. They potentially get to change policy upon that device, right? And the good thing is that the wrap has inherited all of the security posture and policy that you're used to from the office, right? So basically you have extended your corporate office to another location in a secure way where everyone is still in control and the user gets an experience that they're used to seeing. It's incredibly useful from a plug-and-play standpoint. All right, so I hear you say, this is great, it's fantastic, I love the idea of being able to do this, but, you know, I can't mess with our hardware right now. We're on a complete lockdown. I can't go and change configurations on existing equipment. Okay, that's fair enough. Well, many of us probably have some cloud presence, right? Many of us have already been on a cloud journey over the last few years, and maybe you've got a presence in AWS or Azure to extend your data center or begin a cloud migration of some kind. Maybe as part of that, you've created tunnels from those services back inside your corporate network, or maybe you've created, you know, direct connect private network links between those services and your corporate office. So the good thing is we've been working on creating virtual versions of our appliances for quite a while. And so we can deploy in AWS or Azure a virtual gateway. And so you could look at potentially deploying a virtual gateway, so not necessarily touching any of your physical hardware, nothing to rack, nothing to stack, nothing to cable, right? And then allow these access points, these wraps, to connect to that virtual gateway, and then from there create appropriate access to get it inside your company network, right? So maybe not changing the posture, maybe not having to reconfigure physical devices, maybe giving the option to experiment with some of this in a way where you can experiment from home in an easy fashion and try and set something up like this to really, again, make it as flexible as possible for deployment and, you know, frictionless as possible, not only for the IT person, but obviously for the user. Okay, so a lot of us now working from home, we're using all kinds of different productivity tools in order to make contact with our other employees, to keep that connection going, to do our work. One of the things that a lot of people struggle with is obviously good cellular signal strength. And, I'm one of those, right? And, so I like to look at this in an interesting way in that a lot of the cell providers will allow you to turn on Wi-Fi calling. So even though, to get that one-on-one connection with an employee or a boss, the cell signal may not be that good, by turning on Wi-Fi calling and routing that across your Wi-Fi network, that may change that experience dynamic considerably, right? And give that user another productivity tool in their arsenal that they can use successfully during this time. So they may not have a phone at the home. The thing they only may have is a cell phone. And now they're relying on that predominantly for their voice-based communication. So doing things like this potentially can, again, reduce the friction on that user, right? And increase the reliability of that call path considerably during this time. All right, so this all sounds good, but this is amazing stuff that you've been talking about over the last few minutes. But this has got to be complicated. Well, I already talked about how we get these reps online and how we've really tried to, change the dynamic of making it as smooth as possible to get those things online as quickly as possible. But that doesn't stop just with the devices. Like I said at the beginning, if we're not changing the dynamic for the management by the IT staff, we've got a problem, right? So we have to address that. So what we've been doing is really imagining what a management plane really needs to look like going forward. And whether you have on-prem management capabilities or, like in Airwave, for example, and manage your portfolio of Aruba products through Airwave, or maybe you've begun a migration or are full into Aruba Central. What we've done is really try to create that seamless management plane as much as possible to smooth the friction that you have from deploying technology to managing technology to getting insights and information out of that technology that helps make your job easier, right? We have to create a secure and a connected and a simple deployed model that is all handled under a simple management plane. And at Aruba, we feel like we've really managed to kind of get that about right by creating both on-prem capabilities and obviously growing our capabilities constantly in our cloud-based services as we move forward to create the right management constructs for you to use in your everyday job. Okay, so we've talked a lot about technology, and we are now kind of living in what I'm calling the current normal. Obviously hoping that we will return to what we call our normal in the not too distant future. So Aruba is really here to help us all during the time that we find ourselves in. Some of your organizations may be looking at how to potentially kind of get through this by setting up remote locations or expand other capabilities and in particular ways during this time, right? Maybe it's how do I handle retail in this new current norm where I don't have an ability to get people in the shops, that I'm using a lot more drive-up capabilities, or fast food restaurants where we don't have patrons coming into the stores, but just using drive-thrus. How do I potentially do education in a way that makes sense for my students using the technology? Or even how do we handle the needs, the very, very complicated needs of the healthcare industry at this time, right? So we are here to help support that, right? And we've been working with a number of organizations recently in all of these areas to really look at how we can take the Aruba technology and expand it in different ways, changing that dynamic in different ways in order to get connectivity where it makes sense, right? Maybe that's Wi-Fi displayed and extended beyond the enterprise boundary, like the wraps that we talked about. Maybe it's adding outdoor APs to an existing indoor deployment, right? Or creating wrap-based extensions to outlying areas of buildings in order to create connectivity that creates that separation need that we seem to be needing at this time, right? Wi-Fi can be a very quick deploy tool in many situations where wired connectivity of fiber may not be possible at this time, right? So think about clever ways such as, how do I do Wi-Fi meshing in order to jump an air gap? How do I jump from a building space across a parking lot to some other place that I need to service? Or maybe a point-to-point Wi-Fi connection, right? There's lots of different techniques that your account teams can work with you on to walk through potential ways to solve the problems that you're facing right now. So one thing that I did when I was in your situation, we created what we called kits, right? I actually called them LANs in a can, which is kind of a weird term. But basically, these were boxes or hardened shippable cases with enough pieces and parts in them, access points, switches, cabling, whatever it might be, in order to set up an operation remotely. So as a central IT organization, maybe you're looking at how do I do this for my retail environment? Can I set these kits up and get them out to my retail environment in a way that makes sense, right? Or into the hospital, or even into education. How do I do distance learning in a way by creating a repeatable kit of items? And these kits can include all kinds of things. Depending on your business, it could be that you need barcode scanners in those kits. It could be that you need IP telephones or even additional laptops. Really, that kit is kind of defined by you as to what goes in it. So this LAN in a can kind of model potentially can be a way of quickly deploying equipment to places where you need it. So particular for our first responder and medical community, Aruba is donating $50 million in product through our healthcare connectivity bundles. These bundles are designed for rapid provisioning and deployment in hospitals, in clinics, in drive-through testing locations, in temporary treatment centers, or anywhere else that is crucial at this time. So if you're on this call today and you're a group that is offering medical services and you need to bolster your connectivity at this time, contact your Aruba sales or technical contacts, and hopefully they can provide you with more information. So finally, at Aruba, we really abide by a very simple principle. Customer first, customer last. I'm sure you've heard that many times on webcasts and in presentations. In other words, this really means we don't just develop technology for technology's sake. Everything that we do starts and ends with the need of our customers, and that's you. So at this time, I'd like to offer a slight revision to this. Community first, community last. Not only are we working on hardware to support our first responders during this time, but Aruba has started a community of volunteers, pulling on our great Airheads technical community group. They will link available network engineers who sign up and are willing to volunteer their time and expertise with frontline organizations that need technology help to sustain, expand, or enhance their needs during this time. Maybe there's a hospital or medical facility who needs some help, maybe getting a piece of Aruba equipment operational for a field deployment, or just supporting ongoing infrastructure needs at this time. So to those listening today, if you are a frontline facility in need of some help, or if you are a customer, partner, or airhead who has expertise and wants to volunteer your help in your immediate community, please visit our website at community.arubanetworks.com and register. And we would do our best to match the need with the expertise. Your help could really make a difference in potentially literally changing the outcome and also saving lives. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. This is the end of the formal part of the presentation. There are a number of resources, and these resources are continuing to expand almost on a daily basis that we are pushing out there through the website at arubanetworks.com regarding things like networking and how some of this technology that I just talked about can be used. There are use cases and guides about how to do that, solutions around how to do some of the things from a business continuity standpoint. And of course, some of the things I've talked about regarding the promotions is also listed there. Right. So we're also in the process, and hopefully in the next couple of days we'll have some additional information that our Airhead community is putting out that will be published as well, that will go into some greater detail about some of the technologies and capabilities that I've talked about. So that will be incredibly useful resources for all of you on this call to potentially look at. So again, if you would like to learn more, please visit the website.